Welcome. We are talking about rethinking lawns. So glad to have you here. So glad that you care about rethinking something that we have had as a standard and a way of evaluating each other, a status symbol in our country for generations. I'm not going to go deeply into the history, but I can tell you that it came from England when lawns were a status symbol because they had lots of people to take care of them. So if they had a lawn, that showed that they had status and wealth because they could afford the help that it took to make that lawn beautiful and green. Unfortunately, we've kept that, and it's really not in our best interest or in the best interest of the planet. So it is time to rethink our lawns. So let's talk a bit about ecology. Why should we care? There is way more to ecology than just the stuff we see on the surface. And that's the plus and the minus of what we're going to talk about. Because what we're valuing is what we see on the surface. And what we don't understand is what happens under the surface to make that pretty picture happen. Soil is a complex living system. Soil holds 2/3 of all the life on the planet. Now, think about that. That is huge. 2/3 of all life on the planet is under our feet. So, when we very cavalierly poison the things on top because we don't like them, we also poison the things underneath, of course, because we can't see them. And if biodiversity is a concern, this is one of the easiest ways to begin to bring biodiversity back is to take care of our soil. So soil is the number one thing to think about. And it's something that it's easy for all of us to manage, to help, to facilitate, because we can easily feed soil. And compost is like the number one way to do it. But you also have to have water. Now, when I say that, I can just hear everybody's mind go to pictures of hoses and watering systems. And that's actually not what I have in mind. Because one of the things that you can do is rethink how you get water into your land. We get a lot of water here in Spokane. Now we're considered dry. We only get 17 inches of rain a year. That's not a lot. But for the city of Spokane, that's 17 billion gallons of water. If you keep the water you get on your land, you will be fine in so many ways. So, healthy soil and enough water gives you a richness and a vibrancy that you won't get in any other way. And that helps not only you, but everybody around you. This is one of the ways you can keep water. There are lots of ways, and they can look beautiful. The thing about water is that water wants to be on the land. It's only water in soil that helps us. It's only water in soil that makes life happen on the planet. It doesn't help us in the sky. What happens in the sky is it moves water from place to place, and that's an important thing, but it has to come down in order to be useful. And that's what the biotic pump does. The biotic pump is nature's way of making sure that water comes down in the appropriate times and places. And we can help that happen by making sure there's water in the soil because it can't go up if it's not already here. So when water comes down, you want to stop it, you want to slow it down, and you want to let it sink. Those three things: to stop, to slow, to sink. To slow, to stop, to think. To think about how water flows over your property, and then to help it settle and stay, and to direct it at trees and bigger plants that really need a deeper watering. Those are ways to really make sure that you're making the best of the water you get. And these are decorative things. And no, they're not grass. They can be stones, they can be plants. They are hollows, swales. You can build small dams. There's many ways you can do terraces. There's so many ways you can design your land to stop and hold water. So thinking about that is first. That's the very first thing you need to do, to think about how water flows on your land. Now, the bad news is that most of us bought a piece of property that was probably made flat so it would be easy to build on, which means it's much harder to figure out how water wants to be, which means you can encourage it by creating ridges and heights and slumps and swales. You can design those into the land, but you have to be very cognizant. This is not something for an amateur to do. Actually, I would really suggest you pay to have somebody to do this. There is one person in Spokane who does it, and we are working to bring others here. So really talk to us if you want to do that. We will help you find the expertise to make that possible, even if we have to bring it in from outside Spokane. We do have resources, but it's really thinking about how you want water to accumulate and where you want it to accumulate and helping it do that. So when you do that first, then everything else will support that. So the kinds of plants you plant, you can plant in swales, but you have to plant plants that will tolerate the water when they get it and tolerate the lack of water when it's gone. You want plants with long roots. So annuals, not so much. You want to really think about plants that have deep roots and that can grow deep roots. Now, grasses, this is not your Kentucky blue. There are lots of different kinds of grasses, and grasses have really long roots. If you look at the prairie grasses, their roots can be over 3 feet long. And it's those roots in the soil that help that water go down. So it's not just the swales, it's not just the design, but the plants themselves will help you keep the water on your lawn, on your land that you get. So both of those things go together. When you have a variety of plants, not just the monocrop that grass is, but when you have a variety of plants, then you get pollinators and other insects that are very happy to eat the food, the smorgasbord that you set out for them. So that's part of thinking about rethinking your lawns, is how can you feed the critters that need to be fed in the places where you are. So that's birds, and that's also insects. And insects feed birds. So it's a mutual cycle. So you want to think about the kinds of plants that you put in and make sure that they are attractive to critters. And that could be squirrels, it could be chipmunks, it could be other critters as well, depending on how much land you have. The point is, it should be things that other life forms can eat. That's the whole point of an ecology from nature's perspective. It is not decorative and it is not beautiful, although it is. I have seen meadows of wildflowers that could not have been designed more beautifully. Just awesome, breathtaking to behold. But that's not the point. The point is to make it available as food for everything that wants to eat it. So part of rethinking lawns is to rethink how you contribute to the other critters around you that need that food to eat. Grass is not that edible for most folks. And when things eat grass, we get mad, we don't want it eaten. So you want to plant things that are edible. And there's a variety of grasses, and grasses will have flowers, they'll have little bitty flowers. And there are short grasses and there are tall grasses. So this is another thing to think about when you're changing your lawn into a meadow or into something that's not lawn-like, is how much height do you want? And you can design with that height. It doesn't all have to be flat. You can have flat spots and high spots. So you can design, that can become a design tool for you to actually use. The other thing to understand is that one of the things about grass as we know it and use it is it takes a lot of maintenance. Okay, we want it always green, and it isn't naturally always green. Many grasses are green in the winter and spring, and then brown in the summer, and that's the way they are. California is a great example. It's called the golden season because everything turns gold before it turns brown. So understand that color variation. Understand that there are different kinds of grasses, different colors of flowers of those grasses, and those are all design elements that you can actually consciously use. The other thing to understand about that is that nature is not stagnant. And plants actually aren't stagnant either. They move a lot, actually. Trees, maybe not so much, although they propagate, that's how they move. But smaller plants absolutely move, and grasses in particular will, and meadow grasses in particular will. And there's a reason for that. The reason, I'm going to go back and I'll do Miyawaki for us in a minute. The reason for that is because plants take from the soil the nutrients that they need, and they also return to the soil certain nutrients. And every plant has it, like every person has its own needs. And so when that place where the plant is full of what that plant can contribute, that plant will move on. And then what needs to have what that plant has contributed will show up. So if you plant a meadow, you will see over time that those plants will move around your space. They don't always show up in the same place every year. And that's fascinating and it's wonderful. So deeper planting is a Miyawaki forest. Now, not everybody can do this. It's a small forest. It's 1,000 square feet or about 6 parking places. That's not huge. Some of you will have backyards where this would be a very reasonable thing to do, or you have acreage where you could actually do several of these mini forests. They are a way of planting, not so much what you plant. What you plant is original plants. Now, when we're getting away from lawns, which is our forcing nature to do what we want, and start to listen to what nature wants to have happen in a place, then there are certain plants that have been designed to live where you live. And we call them traditional plants. If you can find what was there before white men were there, that's really key because those plants are really designed to be where they are. So you want native species as much as possible. Now, I know that's kind of a problem for some of us who really love some of those flowers that we brought in from England and from other parts of the world. And that's okay. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do those, but I am saying that you can add native plants and begin to intersperse native plants with what you're doing for a couple of reasons. One, native plants provide food. A lot of the imported species don't. Two, native plants don't require a lot of maintenance. So that means they don't require a lot of money in terms of fertilizers and those kinds of artificial encouragements, nor do they require a lot of your labor and time. Once planted, they pretty much take care of themselves, and Miyawaki forests are no exception. So when you plant a Miyawaki forest, it's very intense. You're planting a lot of plants all at once. They're planted incredibly tightly together, as you can see in some of these examples, but they grow 8 times faster. So in a year, you have something you can walk into. In 3 years, it towers over you. And in 3 years, you don't need to take care of it anymore at all. It will handle itself all by itself. So there's a little maintenance for 3 years, and then it's fine. You can let it be. And it will bring back an amazing amount of biodiversity. You will see birds and insects that you haven't seen for decades in some cases. So it's a really wonderful way to begin to rethink your yard. There's a difference between monocrops and the biodiversity that nature really requires. Diversity is not an option. Diversity is life. Life will not happen without diversity. That lawn will not stay there without you spending a lot of time and effort to keep it there. Nature will work very hard to add other stuff, to get rid of some of it and to add other things. We call it weeds. We don't like it when nature does that, but nature does that because diversity is inherent, imperative for life to continue on Earth. So the more diversity we have, the more we are adding life to our yard, the more vibrant and busy it becomes, and the richer, I believe, it looks. I mean, I think it's exciting and interesting to watch what happens. And frankly, I do love a green lawn. It is really nice. And no, I don't like to mow it all the time. I don't want to spend all my time on it. I just don't. There are times to have one. It's nice to have babies be able to play out on grass. It's nice to be able to play with your dog on grass. So have a little bit. That's okay. But you can really diminish the amount of effort that you put into grass. Use grass as a decorative piece, not as the whole thing, and intersperse it with flowers and plants that have a lot more biodiversity. So nature really, really, really is smarter than we are. It understands what it needs to keep life happening. It needs the vibrancy of soil. It needs the wetness of water. And we can help that by working with it. When we do that, we have way less work, spend way less money. It becomes entertaining to see what happens. You can do just grasses. You can design with just grasses. You don't need flowers if you don't want flowers. There are so many options to grass if you really want to open that box and begin to think about other options. We have a class that will go way deeper into these kinds of things, and I encourage you to sign up for that and learn how to work with what nature has provided for us here in this area and to rethink what your land will look like in a way that really supports nature. We worry very much here about water. But we worry about water because we feel we use too much. And actually, that's true. Most of the water that the city of Spokane uses is in the summer for watering lawns. If you have a meadow as a lawn, if you take some steps to shift to work with nature so that you don't have to water because your soil will hold water, you can reduce your water bill. You will reduce less stress on the aquifer, and you will begin to have a lushness around you that you've never had before. When we water from a hose, we are using water that's been treated with chemicals to kill the bugs in the water. Some of those bugs in the water are things that actually the plants need. If you've noticed in your garden, after a rain, there's this bloom. Everybody is like so happy with rain. And yeah, they're happy with water too when you water, but they don't kind of like go poof. It's like, oh, thank you. Okay, that's good. But it's not like, yes, that they get from rain. So designing your land to hold water will give your plants that rain experience. When land holds water, you become drought resistant and you become fire resistant. Now, this is actually a huge thing, and it may be something that we'll do a webinar on specifically. In fact, we will do a webinar specifically on this. We're terrified of fire, and we should be. It's out of control. The land, the forests that we've planted 100 years ago were monocrops. They don't have the biodiversity that's really necessary for the land to hold water or for the land to seed rain, because trees actually call rain, and that's a whole other webinar. So to protect ourselves from fire, they're suggesting that we harden our landscape. And what that means is get rid of anything around the house that would burn. Now, that actually will, sure, it will protect you with fire, but it is a horrible way to live, in my view. I want green around me, frankly. And it makes the land hot because you harden the landscape with stones and gravel, not with green stuff. Green does not burn. If it's wet, it doesn't burn. But when it's hot, it also prevents rain because hot air pushes up and it pushes any rain that would come across away. Yeah, we don't see that in your house. You're not going to notice that necessarily. But if enough people around you do that, you will notice that. So while hardening, yes, works, it doesn't help the planet at all. It actually goes against what the planet needs. Now, we do have examples of people that have truly designed their land to hold water and who have survived fires, but we don't have a lot of them because we haven't done this a lot. This is a fairly new understanding, quite new, actually, maybe 10, 15 years. So we don't have the history that says, yes, you do this, this will happen. We have examples, but we don't have a ton of them. So I'm here to tell you that if you choose to shift your lawn to meadow, if you choose to really work hard at getting your land to hold water, you will have a huge benefit. Even if your neighbors don't, you will have benefit. And we do have examples of this. The biotic pump is nature's magic. It is really a way of re-understanding how water happens in the landscape. We all know that water evaporates off the ocean usually. That's the picture. There's the ocean here, a mountain here, trees on it, right? So yes, it does evaporate. It goes into clouds, it goes over to trees, and it falls. But why does it fall when there's trees? If there are not trees there, it will not fall there. Now that's huge. Australia cut down a lot of the trees along the coast. And what that did was it created a desert in the middle of the continent. We didn't understand that at the time, but that's why that's a desert now, because they cut the trees down on the edge of the coast. So it works this way. And this is not a great, I still am looking for the perfect picture. So it evaporates off the ocean, goes into clouds, comes over to trees, falls down. It falls down and it goes into the ground. It goes into the ground and it forms underground rivers. It feeds rivers and streams that you see on the surface. That's where they come from, right? We know that springs become the headwaters of rivers. You can go to the headwater of a river and watch it come out of the ground. It comes out of the ground because there's water in the ground for it to come out of. It will go into aquifers, and then the trees and the plants that are there. And it's forest, it's not just trees. That's why the Miyawaki method is so important. Forests are diverse. They have a whole bunch of other plants, not just trees, and a variety of trees, not just one kind of tree. And it's that diversity that allows the bioaerosols that it trans-evaporates along with the water into the clouds to seed the clouds so that when the clouds move over to the next section, they are heavy enough to fall easily. If those bioaerosols are not there, water will collect around minerals and around dust, but it takes a long time for it to fall. It won't fall at the same temperature. And so it stays in the air, and it stays in the air until there's so much of it that it has to come down. And then we get torrents, and then we get flooding. So that biotic pump, that diversity of plant life that brings water up from the ground and then puts it back into the clouds along with bioaerosols, is what makes rain happen. So forests create their own rain, and we have seen that in the Amazon. We don't see it, we don't understand it so much in northern forests because it's not as dramatic. It's really dramatic in the Amazon. They know the Amazon forest makes its own weather. They've known that for a long time, but we haven't understood the process. And in fact, the Amazon is losing that capacity. And the Amazon is such a big pump, and it makes so much rain, more rain than it needs. So that rain goes up into the atmospheric rivers, which go to Europe. And so we're seeing drought in other places because the water from the Amazon forest is diminishing. This is a huge global problem. This is why I love the biotic pump, because it's everywhere. It fills the globe. Every part of the globe has a biotic pump that's unique to each area. We can help the biotic pump. We can help that happen. If you pay attention to your soil, if you enliven your soil, if you make it hold water, if you design your land to keep that water there when it falls, you are doing incredible things to help that biotic pump. And if you can talk to your neighbors and get your whole block to do that, if we could get the whole city to do that, we would have a huge impact on the amount of rain we get and on how cool our temperature stays in this area. Places that use the bionic pump well can be 15 degrees cooler than places that don't, like right next door. So your house can be 15 degrees cooler than your neighbor if you use the bionic pump well, if you really work to help it. It is a huge thing that we can do to deal with the changing climate. This is a better picture of the biotic pump, but it still doesn't really speak to the underground water system that is so key. One of the wonderful things about if you have enough land and you do this on that, you will start to see creeks and streams appear that have been dormant for decades. This is one of the real gifts of permaculture. In Australia, they have story after story after story about where farmers have done this in their property and suddenly discover that their creeks will run year round because they've kept the water they got. That's how nature is designed. It knows how to do this. We just have to help it. It's not rocket science, but it makes a big difference, and bare ground prevents that from happening. So everywhere there is not green, it is hot. And wherever it is hot, that air is going up. It is not allowing rain to come down. So think city. We have a ton of hot spaces. So I love water-wise, but when you remove green and put down rock mulch, you're not helping anything. You're not feeding the soil, and in fact, you're making the soil too hot for life under those stones. You want green. Wood chips if you want to. They're better. But you want to keep that ground covered. You want to keep it as moist as possible. Those are really, really important things. We can do this. We have control over this. This gives us agency. It is truly a wonderful thing to do. So here at Soil Smart, we have a strategy. So I'm welcoming you to participate in this strategy. Soil health is the first thing. And we do that through composting and also through biochar. So I'm not going to talk a lot about biochar here, and it's not something, it is something you can buy in the store, or you can get it through Amazon. Bless Amazon, it has lots of stuff. We are working to have it made here. That hasn't happened yet. But biochar is a creation of the Amazon Indians, and it's how they were able to feed so thousands and thousands of people on very poor soil. They created a thing using biochar called terra pareda, or black earth. And that earth is alive, and it grows a foot a year because of the relationship between biochar and composting and soil and how all those nutrients work together. They bloom. They make more of themselves. That's what life does. And biochar is not something like fertilizer that you put on, several times a year. It's like a once or twice application. Um, we're not going to go into that, but it helps hold water, and it also helps feed the microbes because it holds that nutrients in the little holes that are biochar. Biochar is a very porous charcoal kind of thing. Um, so we are suggesting, especially as a jump start, it's really a useful tool. And it allows us to get rid of some of the waste that we don't have the capacity to get rid of in other ways. Dead trees, for instance, make wonderful biochar. Wood is a wonderful biochar source. You can burn almost anything green. It has to be done in a certain way. And again, we're hoping to be able to have that happen here in Spokane. But composting and biochar are one of the first steps for soil health. There are more, and we're bringing those resources here too. But if you can do those two things, even composting is really a big start. And then a landscape design to hold water. That's the next piece that has to be there. And then to create mini forests, to plant diverse kinds of plants, not just mini forests, but meadows work just as well. Plants that have deep roots, that are acclimated to this place, that are rich in diversity, that feed all of the critters that need to be fed. These 5 things help the biotic pump thrive. They support that natural process of the water cycle. So these are things that we can do. They're not difficult. they're not that expensive. In fact, they're in many cases less expensive than anything else you could do. It does take some money to plant um, a Miyawaki forest because you got to buy plants. And it may take some money to do landscape design because you're going to have to pay somebody to help you do that. And if you have lots of land, it may actually take equipment. But composting is pretty much free. And you can make biochar at home, and we can tell you how to do that. So you don't have to spend any money for that either. So it's not about money. It's about the willingness to do that, the curiosity and the creativity to play with your land in a different way, which we're truly, truly encouraging you to do. It is fun. It is enjoyable to see life thrive around you. So join us. We have the course coming up starting next week, and we hope that you sign up. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your willingness to join us in rethinking your lawns. So give us a ring. We're open to answer questions, to provide support, whatever you need. Look forward to talking with you very soon.